Hello folks, and welcome to the Cosmological Argument, an argument for the existence of God which isn't nearly as complicated as it sounds. It's usually associated with the medieval philosopher St. Thomas Aquinas, but the version that we'll be looking at today is slightly different than the version offered by Aquinas, which is usually studied at A level. The version we're looking at looks at questions like, why is there a fly in my soup, or why are there stars in the sky? The questions that humans are always asking, where do things come from? And Aquinas and others focus then on a bigger question. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why is there anything at all? When we look at all those small questions, they lead to the bigger question, why is there anything existing at all? Now, there are lots of things which might have existed, but which don't. So, for example, we can think of unicorns. If we wanted to, we can think of creatures like the Loch Ness Monster, which I'm fairly convinced does not exist, and the evidence is quite good in that one. But there could have been something strange living in Loch Ness. UFOs visiting us from other planets, another thing which might have been true but isn't. But there are all sorts of fictional characters we can think of, human beings in books and novels, which are realistic and could have existed in the real world, but which don't. Now, if we concede there are things which might exist but don't, we also have to realise that there are things which do exist but which might not have existed. Our school might not have existed. Reality could have gone on without City of Armagh High School. Reality could have gone on quite well without me. I might not have existed. You can imagine a world without me in it. There are galaxies like the Milky Way. Our entire universe could have existed without the galaxy, the Milky Way, and all the stars which are in it. The Milky Way could have existed without a couple of stars, I'm sure. We could have taken a couple of stars out of the Milky Way, and the Milky Way could have got along quite well without it. So reality didn't need all the stars which are currently there. In your body, there are 15 million cells dying and being born roughly all the time, and we don't need all of those. They might not have been real. The atoms which make up the universe, well, we could lose one or two of those, or millions of those, or billions or trillions, or many atoms, and reality could go on without those. Maybe reality might have behaved very differently. Our universe didn't need things like electricity. So the big word for all the things which might not exist but do is contingent. Contingent just means it didn't have to happen. And the interesting thing about contingent things is they all seem to depend on something else for their existence. There's an explanation for them. There is some sort of explanation for every contingent thing which exists. Things just don't pop into existence without an explanation. That's why we ask, why are there stars? Why are there rocks? That's why scientists ask those questions. We don't assume that magicians pull things into existence out of nowhere. There's always an explanation for why certain things exist. Now, it's worth considering that if all those things just disappeared, our universe would disappear too. So if every single contingent thing in the universe didn't exist, our universe wouldn't exist. Our universe would just disappear. So now you can begin to see where the cosmological argument comes from. Our universe is made up of lots of contingent things, things which depend on something else for their existence. Planets came out of molecules and gases, and stars, there are molecules which come out of atoms, and the atoms have their explanation and all their forces in the galaxy. Animals, there are explanations for why animals exist, and bugs, there are explanations about where people came from. So if all those things cease to exist, so would our universe. So imagine we could write a big list, a huge list, which contained all the things which might exist, which might not exist but do. A list of all the contingent things that exist. Well, there's some explanation for the fact that that entire list exists. Nothing on the list would explain why the list exists. That's going to do a circular explanation there. So nothing on the list can explain why the whole list exists. And it also doesn't matter how big that list is. There could be infinitely many things on that list. Nothing on it had to exist. So you could have an infinitely long list with a huge number of contingent things. That doesn't explain itself. The only thing that can explain the list is something which isn't on it, something which isn't contingent. And that something wouldn't be like contingent things we know, would have no limits. It would be so great that nothing else could cause it. No beginning, no end. And that sounds a lot like God. So the answer to the question, why is there something rather than nothing, is that something had to exist, God, and it caused everything else. And that's the cosmological argument.